I won't make an introduction. You will introduce yourself. So I have to admit that when I first saw this topic written down, I read it as excited, not exited. And then I remember, I don't know if it is internationally known, but in Latvia we have a saying that you are happy twice in your lifetime, when you buy a car and when you sell one. So is it the same with the company? When you are twice happy when you found an idea and then you sold the company?
I think it's bittersweet. Like building one is, like I think, very exciting. Selling one is like a difficult decision. And when you make that decision, then you're of course happy because at some point it's a culmination of effort. It's bittersweet because like when you exit, it's no more yours anymore. So, as a founder or a CEO or a founding team, you have full control over the destiny of whatever you build. If you exit, get acquired. If you IPO, then you still have control, but shareholders have more. But if you sell it to another company, then more or less, over time, you realize that you have less and less say on what will happen with the product or the company. So.
But Varun, what was you really happy about when it all ended? That your idea worked, that you sold it, that you gained a lot of money. What was the real reason of the happiness?
I think the relief that as a founder, every day you wake up and look at your bank account and say, is there enough money to like make whatever you're trying to achieve be achievable? Like bank account or whatever business plan. And you have this, as the company becomes larger, of course, like that burden is shared. But until like 70 or 80 people, you still feel solely responsible for the well-being of the shareholders, like the people who gave you money, your team, because you work with them every day, the customers who paid for or who are paying you for the product, and you don't want to disappoint any one of them. And then there's family and everything that. So the relief, the first thing is that you sign the thing and you say, and I did this. So we basically entered an agreement 28th of December 2019 with the idea that it'll close. And I took a plane and I went off to Bali. Like the most simplest
well
thing.
Well-deserved.
Yeah, and I was like, for 4 weeks, we don't know. We're trying to close this, but we're not signing up new customers. If someone complains, we have the support team. It was my first 4-week break in some sense. So a relief in that sense. I could not have done that before that point. And unfortunately, the pandemic happened, and then the company that we built was hoping, not necessarily, the pandemic happened, so we built something called video APIs. And for 8 years before, we thought, the video usage, like video calls, will go. Every year, my investor would say, like, Varun, you sold us this dream in 2013. When will it come true? And I was like, 2015. It was always 2 years away. And in 2019, when we made the exit, I said, yeah, I think it's not going to happen yet. We've done this for 9 years now. And then 1 month later, we signed the deal, 15th, 17th of January. Pandemic is declared like 1 week later. And now everyone knows what video calls are. So if I say, what is a video call, even my grandma knows what a video call is. So, disappointing in some sense, but as I said, bittersweet for me.
Mm-hmm. As you all understood, Varun is the one who is the most experienced if we talk about exiting. And can you briefly tell what your company was?
So yeah, I can say, like, for 15, 20 years, I've worked in networking, computer networks, specifically video. So when you had the first megapixel cameras in Nokia phones or first Apple phones, I was part of the team that built some of those things. Eventually, I built a company called CallStats. My idea was there would be Google Analytics for video. So if everyone's going to do video calls, everyone's going to build a video app, healthcare, education, remote work. There's so many dating. Every walk of life can now be represented in a video call. And all these people will need analytics. And CallStats was that thing. It was the only product at that point which did it. We had 100% control of the market. Of course, the market was small. So, and now I'm working for a company which used our product. Was a YC-backed company which started in 2018. And during the pandemic, they started to grow, and they asked me if I would come on board to join them and build this. And I said, yeah, of course, because I was sitting on a gold mine, lost the gold mine. Let's take your gold mine and be part of your gold mine. So, yeah, that's the story.
Okay. So, Jacob, can you share a bit of your story? How did you start it and what your company is about?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Jacob, I'm the co-founder and CEO at Epoc Biodesign. Slightly non-traditional founding story. So for reference, I'm 22 years old. I've been building the company for about 4 years, so started it when I was 18. And it essentially all started out of a project I was working on during my final year of school. So growing up, I was very focused on sustainability, environmentalism. I was leaving class and protesting outside the Houses of Parliament for climate action. I had this opportunity in my final year to take a research class. My teacher said, look, you've done your chemistry, done your biology, come up with a project, research it, present your findings at the end of the year. I'd always been very focused on the environment. I'd done a few beach cleanups, and I knew I wanted to do something in plastics. And I thought it would be interesting if you could use nature, if you could use microbes and enzymes to break down plastic waste into useful materials that you could then use to make a whole set of different things. So for my research project, I wanted to find a microbe that ate plastic. Went out into nature, took some samples, read some literature, and the early results were very promising, but I quickly remembered that I didn't have a PhD and needed somebody a lot smarter than me to help me figure out some science. So I met my co-founder, a guy called Douglas Kell, who's one of the top scientists in the UK, and we decided to start the company together. And what we're building now is a synthetic biology company. So we program enzymes, which are these little natural machines that enable a lot of complex chemical reactions to happen, and we program them to break down plastic waste. So in a big steel reactor, we can take enzymes, we can add them to unrecyclable waste that would otherwise go to landfill or incineration, and we can break it down into chemicals, and we can then sell those chemicals to customers to make new plastics or paints and coatings, cleaning products, really a whole variety of different things. It turns out that this has a lower carbon footprint than making those same chemicals from newly extracted fossil carbon, and it also turns out that plastic waste is very cheap, and this is a very profitable way to make the chemicals that we need to make the world go around. So that's what we're building at the moment.
Okay, cool. Nima, before diving deeper into startuppers' journey, please tell about yourself and about your company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started a company called Lobster, and it's a digital marketplace for sustainable seafood. So basically, the short of it is that we take, on average, 4 to 5 middlemen from the fishing industry, and then we cut them out in order to give the fishermen a better pay, and we are kind of on an overall mission to create a more sustainable fishing industry. So we only work with fishermen who use practices that don't touch the ocean floor and has minimal bycatch. So we're actually trying to create an economic incentive in the market to use sustainable practices.
Okay. So as we have I would say the main thing we will focus on is exiting. Varun, when you started, did you already think about exiting? You had it in mind, or you just focused on just being successful entrepreneur?
Yeah,
what was your focus actually? That's a question.
I think I was a reluctant entrepreneur because, reluctant in the sense I always wanted to build a company, but I was not entirely caught up in the idea that I would work for myself. Right? Like a lot of entrepreneurs say, I want to work for myself and ergo do it. In my case, it was I wanted to build something, and CallStats was not the first company that I started. It was probably like the 5th or 6th attempt at making a company. Most of them failed. Well, all of them failed except this one. The ones prior to them, to CallStats, I raised 50,000 the first time, and we're talking about 2009, 2010, where getting any check, even 50,000 was considered really good. Now you can get 50,000 in this room from someone. And then the second time was $500,000. We returned most of the money back because we failed in 9 months, and we said, we kind of understood what we wanted to do. There's no thesis here. Rather return the money and go build something new. Because the team had come together to build this thing, and we couldn't pivot out of what we had. So the second time we just returned the money. And the third time, CallStats was actually a journey of as I said, a reluctant entrepreneur because I was finishing up my PhD. I was trying to build something in healthcare. Then I thought about education, like with the idea of how to get video into these markets. And this is 2012, 2013, so like almost 10 years ago. And that failed miserably because like, students were not ready or they already had tools, which, they didn't want to use as something new. And healthcare is, broken, but, takes 70 years for anything to change there. So call stats was mainly like talking to all these people, and then I realized that I would play to my unfair advantage, which is data, and I know video. So if other people build experiences on video, AR, VR, web, we would support them. And that was the journey into building it, and we were bootstrapped for 2 years. And when we raised our first round, I remember like the first time I went to the US, 2 people sleeping like in a shared Airbnb, so me and my co-founder, like one bed, drag it apart, stay, and then we go pitch it at an event like this, and we get an offer to get acquired for $1 million on a prototype. And that emboldened us. And then every time an offer came to acquire us, we said no. And then Google came in 2017 and said, like, we love you guys, would you come over? And I said, if you want us, then everyone wants us. So, and if you want us and everyone wants us, then there's a thesis to build a bigger company here. So we said no. Why we sold the company is also like anticlimactic because like we talk a lot about PLGs, product-led growth, and like if you're building a SaaS product. What we realized over time was that the only way for us to actually break through the market was to go enterprise. And that just requires a whole different way of doing things. It's very traditional. It takes like, we used to sign up customers in like 2 months, start getting the first dollar in like 3 months, $50, $5,000 per month, very good growth. But if you want to close $1 million account, it takes 9 months. That's a whole different framework. And that's when I realized that I'd built a company which was for stellar growth, but it was operating on a SaaS model. And for us to grow beyond this, to grow up, either I had to like change the company entirely into an enterprise model or sell it to an enterprise. And one of our customers was an enterprise, third biggest customer of ours. Sold it to the third biggest customer.
So guys, what do you think about exiting? Have you thought about that?
Dream about it. I think for us, we started the company to solve one very, very specific, very large problem, and that was ultimately our driving force. Is, success for us is we want to solve one of the world's biggest problems, plastic waste, and the impact that it has on climate, biodiversity, human health. But by doing that, if we succeed in that, then we will build a hugely exciting, enduring business. And then at that point, we can think about, well, how do we want to take that forward? I think for the company that we're building, there isn't necessarily a clear acquisition partner for us at this stage. The ecosystem isn't developed enough. So for us, it's, okay, well, if we focus on building the technology, scaling it really effectively, and scaling our business from there, that's really our pathway to success in solving a big problem, but also building a hugely exciting business.
What about you?
So I have actually, how do I say this? I've made a soft exit, actually. So I stepped out of operations about half a year ago.
In the company that you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I started that company about 4 years ago, and I ran it. I was the CEO, and then I hit a point where I realized me and my co-founder, to say it as it, we were kind of butting heads, and not in any bad way. We had the exact same vision for what we wanted to do with the company. We just wanted to do it 2 different ways. And we're really good friends. Our partnership is based on friendship. So one day I just said to her, like, one of us needs to take control. Like, we have the exact same outcome. We know exactly what we want this company to do, but we want to do it like this, So one of us has to take control. And I think it's best if one of us takes lead over the company fully, because we were kind of operating as co-CEOs, even though I was technically the CEO. And I think I was getting to a point where I realized I love the very, very early stages of companies, and she was ready to take full control over the Blue Lobster. So we came to a nice agreement where I got some of my shares bought out, but I still have an ownership, and so I'm like an active shareholder now in the company, but she's actually running the daily operations. So in that sense, there has been already a soft exit in some way, and I realized I just think I'm very, very good at the 0 to 1 part. I love the early stage building. When it comes to maybe just we were getting to a point where we fought our way through COVID. We weren't thinking about exits through COVID, we were just thinking about survival, because 90% of our revenue was with the restaurant industry and the hotel industry, so like, you know, our revenue would dip to 0 every time new restrictions would come in. So we were just in survival mode, and when we came out to the other side, that's when we had started having these bigger strategic conversations. And I mean, an exit is definitely like, of course, that's a dream, but I think the mission for us is so much more important. We really, really want to make a mark on the world, and I guess you're also impact-driven, so I guess you get that. The idea that we could actually make a difference for the fishing industry totally outweighs the idea of a big exit, and those two things might come hand in hand, but something we also talk about is like, acquisition potentials right now are companies that wouldn't fall in line with our values. So it's also really difficult to say we're building a marketplace which right now is exclusively for sustainable fishermen, but if put over into someone else's hands, might be used very differently. So we also have the mission in the center when we're considering who we're going to eventually partner with.
So do you feel like you have left the company, or you are still in there?
Yeah, it's weird. So I mean, I have already spoken to my co-founder twice this morning. So I mean, somehow I still feel like I'm part of it. And actually, this has been a really good setup for us, because I think I'm actually better at helping run the company at a distance, because you guys probably know this too. Like when you get into the machine room of a company, you can kind of get blinded to the bigger strategic issues. And having me know the company as well as I do, being a step away, actually makes me a much better advisor to her. And we meet up every second week, and we have a 3-4 hour workshop. So I'm still kind of heavily involved in the direction of the company. So to be honest, I'm really enjoying this spot, because I don't have to say goodbye to my baby. And at the same time, I get to start looking into new things. So yeah, it's been a good journey so far.
Yeah, but do you experience this happy moment when you when you are well, you already explained that basically that you are now in your happy spot, that you haven't left yet, but you are still in. Okay, there are 3 different stories basically. But Jacob, what about your happy moment? Like, okay, you have to still do things. You know what you want to do. Well, you want to change an industry and disrupt, and all those happy words that everybody wants to do with the startup. But have you imagined this exiting moment, and like what will be the feeling?
I'd book a flight to Bali, I think.
Yeah.
But no, I've not really thought about it. I think obviously it'd be a very exciting outcome, bittersweet, or maybe just bitter, depending on the nature of it. I think there are so many different ways that it could go. Like I say, I mean, there isn't a clear kind of acquisition partner for us, so the only obvious route for us to exit is to go public. We might want to do that, we might not want to do that. That still keeps me actively involved in the company, and that's what I want to do for the foreseeable, really enjoying it. So far, so good. I guess we're so far off from that the focus very much is on what are we doing day to day, how is that putting us on our journey to achieving that outcome. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there are usually in those startup conferences, a lot of people are talking about those challenges, problems, what founders are facing. But I would like to ask you, what's the most exciting part of being an entrepreneur? Why are you doing that?
I think it's the mission. At the end of the day, it's like you wake up, you have a mission, you have some values that you've instilled both in yourself and in the company. And that's the yardstick that you gauge everything by, right? Like your employees follow those values, and there's a mission, there's a vision, there's a path. And I think every day, I don't think people actively think about acquisitions. We can come back to this. I have a model that I can share with the team, with the people here. It's like the acquisition, if and when it comes up, it has to be aligned in some way to the outcome. Right, like the vision or the mission that you built. Sometimes you have to take an exit early, and sometimes you have to take an exit later. Sometimes you feel yourself cannot take it to where you brought it to 0 to 1 or 1 to 10, whatever, and at some point you say like, you need someone professional to come and do this, or this can be a professional CEO, it could be a professional company, it can be, now you have investors that take full control over the company, it's still private, private equity, and you get your exit, you still maybe get to be CEO of this smaller part of a bigger company. It's not publicly traded, so you have a lot more control. So, it depends on how these alignments happen. Of course, when you fundraise, investors always want to know. So those are always the sync points, your board meetings, you're running out of cash. These are all points where you have to actively think through it. But I think on a day-to-day basis, no one, anything in the 7 years that I ran it, not until like summer of 2019 when I said, fundraise more, give up a lot more of the equity, and maybe the outcome would be a complete failure because you may not be able to transition the company to where it needs to go. Or like find one of these 5 customers that want us, have expressed interest, figure out a path, and we know that they're aligned to our goals.
Okay, what about you guys? Nima?
It was about what makes you happy.
Yeah, as an entrepreneur.
I think once you get started with starting to build stuff, for me it's totally addicting, and I think that's why I'm excited to be back in like more like this sandboxy space. I'm also joining an investment syndicate, so now I'm a bit more like on that side too. But I just think once you have tried for the first time to have something in your brain and then put it out into life and not just see it actually work, your first customers are like such a big kick, not because of the money part, but because you're watching someone actually use the product or the service that you said you were going to make, and suddenly, like I remember the first time someone ate fish at a restaurant and I just watched them and I was like, how the hell did we get fish all the way into their plates? But it was so great. And then the next big moment for me is when you start building a team. And I remember the first time that our team members came into the room and said, we have an idea, we want to build this in this project. And I hadn't thought of it already. But that moment where you started something and then suddenly it starts building upon itself and other people come and they add their visions onto your little seedling. For me, that whole experiencing that process for me is completely addicting and just so cool. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about being in the startup space.
That's so beautifully said. Described. Jacob, what about you?
Yeah, I was going to use the analogy of a seed and sort of watching that grow. I have to think of another now. Look, there's something massively intoxicating and rewarding about making something from nothing, going from 0 to 1. But then I think building the team, seeing them contribute their own ideas and thoughts, and coming up with ideas that I, as a founder, I never would have thought of that. And that's hugely exciting. I think for us, in particular, one of the things that makes me happiest, one of the things that I find most satisfying at the moment is, we set some pretty ambitious goals for ourselves, right, at the beginning of the year. And we hadn't quite hit our Q4 goals last year, and we were feeling a little bummed out about that. Sometimes with science, you can't really control whether things are going to work well or how long they're going to take to work. But we set these ambitious goals for ourselves at the beginning of the year, quarter by quarter, and we're already on to Q4 in terms of the goals. Maybe they were too easy, but we don't think so. They were very ambitious. And seeing the most mind-blowing science happen that, the scientists on our team who are maybe a bit more conservative would say, it's going to take longer than that, like we're just not sure. And then seeing as well their own confidence and belief in themselves and the work that they're doing and sort of saying, yes, like we can do this, we are going to achieve that. And I think seeing that mindset shift within people is hugely rewarding and really exciting because you just think, okay, well, what's going to come next? What else are we going to be able to do with this? Seeing that internal flywheel in your team is really fantastic.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for both of you because Varun already answered that he said no to Google. But what about you guys? Do you imagine that in your industry, I don't know who is the Google in your industry, but this company would approach you and said, hey, we would like to buy you. Do you think you have guts to say no?
I mean, realistically, we make chemicals. So the Google in our industry is like a Dow or an Exxon or one of these companies. I don't really want to sell to that company, I got to be honest. So I'd like to say I have the guts to say no. Yeah.
Okay. What about you?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think because, I guess the potential buyers in our industry is also a lot of them, the players that are already embedded in the, let's say, the old school industry, and to be harsh about it, probably have had practices that have ruined a big part of our planet for many years, and that's like against the mission that we're working for. So right now, I couldn't imagine a setup where we would want to say yes, because I can't see a situation where someone would invest or buy us out and not want to change our practices away from the sustainability thing, because in the fishing industry, this is a very particular subject that people don't like so much. So I can only imagine our work being rolled back, and I think for that reason we would say no. If someone would be willing to uphold those values, then maybe I'd be weak or whatever. Maybe then I would say yes. But I think it's more about the values being switched or not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have some questions in the audience? If someone wants to ask something, then just raise your hand. Okay. Not questions yet. Okay,
One
guys.
point I would add, like I think quite often, like the thesis that you're saying, like we'll sell it when it aligns. I totally agree with you. Like what I'm going to say is what people told me, and I said, no, this doesn't make sense, but I'll volunteer the other aspect of what people bring up in this case is, like to sell it to someone who can take the product on would give you money, and if they don't do the right thing, you now have the money to like re-execute your plan, right? So you get to do a do-over. And there's some examples like, there's Napster, and then there's Spotify. Napster didn't survive. It changed the industry completely. And then the folks of Spotify met with the folks of Napster and said, like, what did you do wrong? And like actually the person who built Napster helped Spotify through investments and such, like, and basically re-envision the market that he wanted in 2000, in 2009. So I'm just saying a counterpoint to like why some people objectively think about exits in some different manner. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't really care about the money. But I think the framework that I think about, like, and when we talk about exits and acquisitions, there are like 4 things. You cannot have all 4. You can have only 2 or 3. One is, do people, like people who acquire you, can acquire your company, like the business, so the customers, so the money it makes. The people, right? Like the team that you built was so like good at doing what you're doing. Third is the product, which is the outcome of the money that came in. And the fourth is actually like the shareholders. These are not the 3 people, these are the people who gave you money, right? Who are on your cap table. And you told them when you took their money that you will give them, if not 10, if not 100, you'll give them 10x back. So if you took 2 million, you want to give them 20 or 200 million, right? So like there is these 4. And you can only do, if you're very, very successful, 3. Most people do only 2. And I think the values actually, when you build the company and build your values, you have to be very clear what those 2 things are. So, like you care about your team, then that's one pillar. Then you do right by your team. And everyone has to do that because like you build, like if you have more than 10 people, you're already in that path. And then you have customers, which like if in your case is like, if you sell to a bigger company, like do your current customers lose what they're getting from you? Will they still get it? And your shareholders are there, like if they're very supportive, they probably will not care about what happens. They of course expect you to give them 10 or 100x. But if it makes sense for, like, if your values align, then if you get 2 out of those 4, and you think like that's the right decision to make, then you make it. And I think, unfortunately, the news and publishing always, like if you're on TechCrunch or whatever, it's always the dollar that comes with it. And unfortunately, like a lot of our conversations are about like how much money the company made, or the shareholders made, or the CEO made, or whatever. And I think it's irrespective. Like at the end of the day, like you have to see like what happened to the other 2 things, like the business because maybe you sell, like maybe the product was not right. Like you got your customers, you got your team happy, you sell it to a bigger company, and you build some new product based on that, which services them in a better way. So.
Yeah, thank you. That was a very reasonable, all those points that you have to consider. But guys, what you would consider, what you would look at if the appropriate investor would approach you and said, hey guys, are you ready to exit? We are ready to buy you. What were you will be looking for?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost for us, it's strategic alignment on the problem that the company is there to solve. Like if, for example, an Exxon or a BASF came to buy us and said, look, we want access to your technology, but we're actually a threat to them because we can undercut their prices. If that's something that they can make guarantees to scale, or if it's a strategic purchase to kind of tuck under the carpet, maybe, that's not something that we would align with. We would absolutely say no to that. I think we would need to look closely at like my involvement and my co-founder's involvement. Like this is still our baby. We still think we're the right people in this world to build and run this company. And also, our team and what happens to our team. Our shareholders certainly will get a return, so I'm a little less worried about them. I think they'll be happy, but yeah, absolutely, we need to keep those things in mind. The biggest red line for us would be if somebody who acquires us is not willing to continue solving the really big problems that we set out to solve. Otherwise, we'll just do it ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Nima, what about you?
Yeah, I think basically in the same vein, I think there would be two harsh criteria for us. One would be that they wouldn't compromise on the fishing methods that were used, and probably also some kind of commitment to upholding a high payout for the fishermen, because we have like the environmental sustainability, and then we have the fact that we're paying the fishermen more. And even like we're based in Denmark. Even in Denmark, where we have like a strong welfare state and a high minimum wage, fishermen are still earning way below the minimum wage right now, and many of them are leaving the industry because they can't live off the money that they're earning. So for us, there's also the social aspect of ensuring that the fishermen that have committed time and taken risk working with us throughout the beginning of our company will also be taken care of afterwards, and that those values go through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's talk about money a bit. I don't know, Varun, about your situation in your bank account after an exit. I won't ask you about that. But guys, do you feel that it is possible, like, to really pay, to get this feeling that finally you as a co-founder been paid for all those challenging years? Or is this actually not about money, and it doesn't matter if you have 1 million, 10 million in your bank account, it's still, you do not perceive it as a payroll?
If I might, as someone with not much in my bank account, I think that making it about money and making it about the number of zeros in your bank account is not very good for your health. It's not very good for your life. You're never going to be happy, even if there's a particular number you want to aim for. Once you're there, you kind of want a little bit more. That's fine, but I don't think it can be the main driving force. At least for us, like I said earlier, if we go out and we solve the problem that we're really trying to solve for, like the zeros will come. It's a secondary effect. So I think that the most effective thing for us to do is to focus on the problem and sort of worry about the money later. As long as I can buy my coffee in the morning, it's okay.
Do you have something to add?
Like, I think I would say two things. Don't underpay yourself, but also don't overpay yourself while you're building the company. Pay enough that you're not thinking about making rent, like doing whatever you need to do. Like if you have some hobbies, they make your mental health better, and you need to like cutting down. If you can't do those things that would keep your mental health up, then will retroactively hurt the business. So pay yourself enough, not outrageously. And as you said, like at the end of the day, if this company does not succeed or it succeeds and you don't get the payout you want, I think if you put out good stuff into the market, like through a company or through, eventually you will, because like you'll make a name, you'll do some consulting. There will be ways where you would get to, like at some point Exxon might call him and say like, you exited a company, whatever, can you help us? And that's the day you say, you guys can pay me $1,000 an hour. or $10,000 an hour, whatever number comes to your mind, you go and ask for that, right? Don't do that when you're on your own payroll, but you can do that at a later point if the exit was not what you thought it would be. So I don't think entrepreneurs really think about money, but as I said, like you should think about it enough that you pay everyone.
Nima?
Oh yeah, I totally agree with that. And also, if you don't put, I think your company doesn't really reflect a true picture of if you're not taking anything to cover yourself. I know many of us start off working for free because we just wanted to work. We don't want to take anything out of the company. But the truth is also you're not reflecting a true reality of how good your business is doing. Because if it can't carry wages for management, then. But yeah, I agree that you need to just cover your. Because if you're stressed about financials at home, you're fucked. And I just want to iterate as well. I also think that if you want to be really, really rich, really, really quick, then I don't actually think startups is the right place to do it. It always takes longer. Of course, there are these examples of something crazy happening, but it takes many years to build a success, an overnight success. So yeah, probably different ways. If finances are your top one priority, then easier ways to do it than founding a company.
Yeah, then startups is not the right place, right? Yeah, to sum it up, I think a lot has changed from 2009 when you started your company to raise some money and to do things. But yeah, some things do not change, and this is the thing that startups is about: the mission, about problem solving, about challenging yourself. And then if this brings zeros in your bank account, then you can consider yourself to be really lucky, right? So thank you guys for the discussion, and keep doing what you are doing, and yeah, keep looking for bigger solutions of problems, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.